All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Never Too Late podcast. This is your host, Tony, again, and I've got another great guest for you this week, and Martin Schoendorfer. How's it going, Martin?
I'm great. Thank you, Tony. How are you?
Pretty good. So you're joining us all the way from Berlin, is that right?
Yes, I'm in Berlin right now. So it's evening here and in the middle of the day for you, I think.
Yeah. Got a time difference there. That's all right, though. We got some stuff to talk about. So the first thing I'd like to do is just, ask you to introduce yourself to the audience and let people know who you are and what you do.
Sure. So my name is Martin Schoendorfer, and I'm a transformational and holistic life coach. And what I mainly focus on is I support people with creating a very compelling life vision. And the reason why I call it like a very compelling life vision is because I've seen it so many times where people kind of heard that inner voice, like there's more to life than what they're currently experiencing, but they don't really know what that is. And I see it as part of my mission to support people figuring out what does that voice tell them, and then not just listen to it, but being able to produce it on the outside and actually living that vision. And that's what I do, and I love it.
That's awesome. I love that mission because this keeps coming up as like a kind of a common theme in all the interviews I've been doing for this podcast. Is there's been something that I've been thinking about for a long time. If you believe in manifestation, I'm starting to kind of come around to that idea because I've been on this topic for a while. Like, what is my vision, my purpose? How do I execute? And here's a guy in front of me that's your purpose, to help people find that. That's really cool. So what got you into doing this? Like, there must have been some kind of trigger that said, hey, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, right?
Yeah, definitely. There were quite a few of those. So I started in a similar kind of branch, I'd say, in high school. Back then, what we were offered is that we got trained to become a mentor and a mediator for peers. So for students who either just started new in the school, they provided a mentor to guide them throughout the first year. And also when they had some issues with parents, with other students, or with their teachers, that they had someone their age to talk about that, compared to a grown-up who might not understand them, or where they might not feel they can open up as well as they could with someone their age. And of course, back then, nobody told me this was actually something you can do as a profession. It's just something you can do while you're studying at school, but not something long term. So at that point, when it came to what I want to do for a living, I didn't follow that route, and I went into kind of a completely different area, which was acting. And in acting, so I grew up in Austria, but then I was like, I want to study in a different country. I had that kind of feeling within me. I just want to explore the world as well. And I moved out to New York and studied acting at the Lee Strasberg Theater and Film Institute. And my first day there, I met her through one of my siblings, and she said, this city is going to tear you down, it's going to lift you up, it's going to tear you down until you found yourself. And I was like, yeah, sure, I know who I am. Well, not shortly after that, I was like, damn, she was right. And also through acting, because acting is such an internal process, you have to really dig deep down within you to connect with parts that you might not want to connect to. One of my acting teachers, she actually said the things that we experience as human beings, especially the negative things, usually people would want to move past it as quickly as possible and say, like, I wish I had never experienced that. As an actor, it's like you appreciate those situations because it gives you kind of food for being able to act in a completely different way out of experience. And through that whole process, I felt even more lost, where I was like, damn, there's a lot within me that I kind of didn't want to revisit from my past and experiences, where I was like, I just want to move past them. I don't want to go into it. And I feel like that was also the point where I started questioning myself a lot. And then when I moved out to LA a couple of years later, a friend of mine was like, "Hey, there's a great seminar I'm attending. Do you want to be part of it?" And I was like, "Why? Well, is something wrong with me?" And I was like, and then she explained to me, kind of, and convinced me that this is something beneficial to self-discovery. And when I attended, I was like, "Wow, this is incredible!" Like, I still don't really know who I am, but this was so powerful. And it reminded me of the experience I had when I was in high school. So through that, kind of, that spark came alive again. And I was like, I want to see if I can do something like that. And then
Okay.
I had a very big issue. I always had that mentality of plan A is acting. And if I have a plan B, it's going to distract from plan A. And you mentioned before, like, purpose, mission, and a couple of years ago, because I've been on that journey for over a decade, but it wasn't until, like, say, like 4 years ago, I had a conversation with someone, and we were talking about, like, purpose and mission, and he gave me something that still to this day I took it on as my truth. And he said, "What if purpose is nothing outside, but purpose is the purpose of life is that you are truly alive, that you appreciate the ups and downs, and that you just appreciate the gift of life." And I was like, wow, this is a completely different perspective on life and on purpose. And once I shifted that kind of mentality, I was more open to say there's a plan B. But really, now getting to the point of the question you asked, what was the turning point? Because I had that spark within me already, but I didn't dare going after it and making it reality until my brother asked me, "So what do you do for a living?" And I was like, "Well, I'm an actor, but my day job is sales and different jobs that I did at that point." He's like, "So you get money from those day jobs?" And I was like, "Yeah." So he's like, "That's your main job. That's your plan A right now." And I was like, "Oof, that hurt." And- but that was, I think, what I needed to hear, because that made me question a lot of my choices. And I said, well, with acting, you have a lot of in between time where you're not acting. So I was like, if I use that time during acting jobs to do something that that I don't really resonate with, that for me doesn't have any kind of deeper meaning, then how about I just shift that, and during that time I do something that doesn't just have value for myself, but has value for other people and ultimately the whole world. And that was for me the turning point where I was like, I think I want to change it around. And I started looking for different opportunities to get into coaching. I hired my own coach for the first time. And that moment I was like, this is what I want to do. Then I studied coaching at an institute from the UK. And yeah, that's why I'm here today. And I'm like, that was the best choice I could have made.
That's awesome, and that's quite a story. Going all the way back to high school. It's not. I can think of some times when, like, in high school, middle school, just like school time, right? My school age, that I can think of a few times where it's like, hey, this is something that speaks to me, right? You come across something, which is what school's for, right? To expose you to different things.
Mm.
It should be for. And it's really awesome that where you went to school, you had that peer-to-peer counseling program, right? Here, like where I went to school, at least, I'm not sure anywhere else in the States, but where I went to school, that really wasn't a thing. If you needed help with something, you went to the adults and whatever, right? And then depending on where you go to schools, they're not very helpful, or anti-helpful in a lot of cases. So that's really cool. You have that kind of program where you went to school there, and that led you down this path to where you are today, right? That is something that I think if people really stop and reflect on their life, like you're talking about life experiences informing what you do for acting, right?
Mm.
If you look at life as, all the world's a stage, like that type of thing, right? If you look at life that way and think, okay, how am I going to react to today based on my experiences and what's in front of me, and then do that from a positive, perspective versus, oh, this terrible thing happened to me, victimhood and all those other things. Everyone's going to come out better on the other end of that,
Totally.
and that is hugely impactful or has been at least in my life, because that's ultimately what led me to decide to get sober just about 2 years ago and to go down the path I am, and sitting here now in front of a camera talking with you and whoever else is out there listening. So that's really cool. It sounds like for you, through that process of reflection, self-reflection, and feeding that into your acting, and then bringing out those emotions, and then transferring those emotions, everything, to your audience, which is really the goal of what acting is, right? It sounds like that's been very cathartic for you in a lot of cases, like, being able to face past demons or whatever it may be. That's that fair to say?
Yes, absolutely. There's actually, in my first, I think it was my first acting class, when my teacher said, this is not therapy. It's the opposite. Like, this is not about you going through emotions or through experiences in order to get through them and get past them, but acting is more about getting into it so that you create an authentic emotion. But I always felt like at the same time, there is something still therapeutical about it, where it's because it's the first thing very often what we do as humans is we push something down, or we're like, this is not the right time to deal with it, I'm going to deal with it later. But through that process of acting, it's like you have to go in it, because otherwise you cannot really be authentic and play that part. So pushing away is the opposite of what you do, and you start accepting it. And I think acceptance is one of the most important things in order for you to move forward. And through that acting experience, for a lot of experiences, I was able to accept it more, compared to trying to push it away and not look at it, and kind of like not facing the demon. And that's what I always say within coaching. I don't like to focus on the past too much, because it can very easily get into that kind of direction of focusing too much on it, and reaffirming the story that we have around the past. And the problem with that is our subconscious does not differentiate between what we think about and what actually is happening right here, right now. So when we think about the past in our subconscious mind, it's happening right now. So you're having an emotional reaction to what you think about, even though it's not really happening right now. And the issue with that, if we do that too much, then the past is always the present moment as well. And that it will really actually basically living in the past. So what I do in coaching is when I look into the past, it's about what can we learn from it, what can we appreciate about it, and it's more like a reflection and self discovery process, and not so much about let's go into the past to resolve the past, because the past, I mean, in the end, it's done, it's over with. But it's what is happening right now that might prevent us from moving forward. But more so, I focus on the future and say, okay, like self-image. In acting, like you said before, life is kind of a stage. So with self-image, it's the same as in acting. You have to give a story or a script play in front of you, but there's no life there yet. It's just words. And as an actor, it's about creating that story and making it alive, connecting to it, so that you can also then connect to the scene partners and the audience. And it all starts with understanding the character. Where's the character coming from? What's the thoughts? What's the dreams and the goals? And that is all connected to self-image. How does the character see himself or themselves? And it's really that self-image which has such a huge impact. And that's what I use in coaching when I look into goals or the future vision. What is the connected self-image with that new goal? Because you have to be different in order to experience something different. And you cannot kind of go there from where you are right now. because you have to improve, you have to become different in order to experience something different. Therefore, looking at what you've had so far is not going to get you further ahead. So, I mean, it can happen, of course, everybody is different, and some processes that I use, it doesn't work for everybody. But with the people that I've worked with, it worked in the way that we looked at what is the new self-image? What is that new version of yourself? How do they think, feel, act, behave, dress? Like really create that image of the version who has already achieved what you want to achieve. And then you can start adjusting and say, what can I change right now? Little steps, like a 1%, 1 degree change is going to get like create over time a huge difference between where you would have gone if you had not changed. So making small changes to your behavior, to the way you think, or even the way you start reflecting and making choices more consciously and more based on the future than the past, it can lead you to a completely different outcome than if you're just going with the flow and with kind of the focus on the past. I kind of compare it with driving a car. If you want to go from point A to point B, the main focus should be out of the window in the front. If you have the majority of your focus in the rear view mirror, not good.
Right.
Soon
Crash and burn. Yeah.
In life, somehow we are taught so much like to look into the rear view mirror, but still be able to focus on driving straight ahead. Where it's like, how does that work?
Yeah. So yeah, no, that's again, like, this whole manifestation thing I mentioned earlier. It's crazy because some of what you just said there is, it's active in my life right now. Someone had said to me over the weekend something about, I don't remember exactly what they said, but like basically, if you believe it, it's already happened, right? That's looking into the future, right? And when I think about all this stuff, especially like I look at this from the perspective of my sobriety, right? Because that has been the biggest shift in my life by far. Shy of my kids being born, that is the biggest thing that's ever happened in my life. And when I'm looking at it, I look back to the day that I decided to get sober. And if anyone's listened to the podcast before, you know that story and whatever, like how I got there. But it's, when I look at that, the decision ultimately came down to like, I don't like where this is going, right? It was, I got there through a bunch of stupid decisions, bad things that happened in life that I let take control of me and all those other things, right? But I hated where it was going because I knew at the end of the day, I was going to end up just like everyone else that ends up lost in the bottle, or, my thing is alcohol, or someone that gets lost into drugs or whatever. You're going to end up in a bad place, probably in the ground, right? Or in prison or whatever it may be. So I didn't like where it was going. So I made a decision that day to say, where do I want to be? What does the person that I envision myself to be? Who is that? And what does that look like? And it took me a long time to really, figure that out and make the steps to get there. But I decided to make those steps. So that's, again, it's crazy like how much this stuff comes up when you're actively thinking about it. And if you look at it all from that perspective, if you have a big goal, and I'm sure you talk about this with your clients at some point too, if you got some big goal, some big life vision, start now. Like, you are that person today, not next year, right? Everything you need is already inside you. The ability to learn, the ability to speak, whatever it is. And if you don't have those things, you can figure it out, right? So that's awesome. And I'm really glad that I'm not alone in thinking all this stuff. Sometimes it kind of feels kind of lonely, right? So
I feel you on that. I mean, first of all, very powerful what you just shared, and I'm very happy also that you're able to share it openly and talk about like the struggles that you've experienced in life, because so many times we don't do that. And why I'm sharing this is because it's all connected with also manifestation, because the first step is accepting. Because if we don't accept it, we always have a resistance. And when we resist, this is the main energy that we're focusing on, and that is going to create the manifestation. We're going to experience more of that. And I'm a little controversial when it comes to affirmations and stuff like that, for example, because very often we lie to ourselves and it doesn't really resonate with especially our subconscious programs. But also when it comes to any form of addiction, I have a little issue with the way it's very often like set up, where it's like, especially when it's with the like meetings and stuff, where the introduction is always like an affirmation, where it's like, I am this or I am that. And it's the same with like looking into the past when you're like, oh, I'm still suffering from a trauma, where it's like you're affirming whatever is going on subconsciously, you're affirming that this is the reason why you are where you are right now. And that is kind of putting you in a cage, and or it can lead to that, like putting yourself in a cage where you're defining yourself based on something that previously happened, instead of focusing on, yes, this happened, I completely accept it, this is what's going on right now, but I can change. Because our brain, we can change it. It's not set in stone. We can literally change so much about the way our brain works, the neural pathways and everything. So when we look into the future, we can start rewiring our brain. And that does not work while we still focus on an old belief or an old label that we put on ourselves. So when I'm like, the same with like, I'm broke, when I'm like, I'm broke, that affirms I do not have money, I wish I had more. And when it comes to manifestation, it's like, this is what the energy, like it's also a science, action, reaction. What I put out there is going to come back. And if I put out there the I'm broke, then the money will not come, but it will be a bill. It will be something that will reaffirm the mindset that you have. So, but if I affirm, oh, I'm rich as whatever, then it might not resonate with your experience. Then subconsciously you might be like, well, this is not true. I don't see it. I don't experience it. So it might also create resistance. And what you shared is kind of like that acknowledgement and the acceptance of like, okay, this is my experience, but I want to change. And this is, I think, one of the best affirmations you can say is, this is the way it is right now, but I know it can change. I'm on the way to get there. I am doing the best I can to go forward step by step.
Yes.
And that kind of creates space within you, and you can start letting go of the past and the labeling and all that, and focus on the future, on how you want to create your life and what you want to manifest.
Right. Yeah, no, I look, talking about like the acknowledgement and, understanding where you came from, right? And you have to understand where you came from in order to move forward, because that does inform so much of what we think and feel on a day-to-day basis, right? But I'm glad you're on that same page there too. You can't just ignore everything.
No.
That's how you end up in the bottle to begin with, right? You're trying to suppress all those things. But you mentioned the meeting structure, like AA and that kind of stuff. And I tried that. It really never worked for me. And that might be because I wasn't ready at the time that I tried it, or whatever reason, right? But this time around, when I'm sober for the longest I've ever been since I started drinking, right? I decided not to go that route. And one of the biggest reasons is because of how it's all framed within that structure. I fully understand that, Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, that program does work for a lot of people. That's why they're still around, right? But I don't agree that it's like presented as the only option, right? And I'm not sure if I have the right answer or not, but what's working for me is working for me. But when you talk about everything starts with that affirmation of, hi, I'm Tony, I'm an alcoholic. It's like, okay, well, I've been sober for just about 2 years now. Am I actually still? Some days I think I might be, because like I really want to drink pretty bad, right? But it's not a day-to-day constant thing. So like, am I actually, or am I just having a bad day? And that's a struggle I think anyone's going to have with anything.
Even that moment, you can rephrase and say like, right now I have the urge to drink, because then it's an urge, and you're not making it about your personality, but about an experience. And yes. I think one of the things, like you said, there's one way doesn't work for everybody. Everybody has to figure out their own way, but there's, like different experiences that we all have as human beings. And it's all about figuring out that's one of the questions I always ask in coaching. Does it work? Yes or no? If it doesn't work, well, then let's figure out a different way. If it works, fantastic, keep doing it, because in the end, there's no right or wrong. It's just, it's effective or it's not. And that's basically in life about everything. It doesn't matter if it's a personal goal or professional goal. It's all about what's my way, like what's your way, what works for us individually. And some things that might work for me might not work for people that I work with. And then it's all about flexibility and seeing like, how can we change that, and how can we make it very into something that works for the person where it's about. But I think what's going on also in society to such a big degree is this is how it works. It doesn't work differently. And if you're outside that box, then you're just like a little crazy or whatever. And I'm like, that's not true. It's just like different kind of thinking.
Yeah, and I just posted something the other day because it popped into my head when I was trying to get to sleep the other night. I was like, quit thinking outside the box, just destroy the damn box. Like it's a box. It's not a good place to be stuck. So don't worry about thinking outside of it. Just get rid of it. Obviously that's pretty, vague, but it works for me. And every time I've made a positive move forward in my life, and this is actually one of the things I was going to bring up a minute ago, was, looking back and understanding where we're coming from, right? There have been times in my life where for short-term or longer periods, I've been what I would consider extremely successful, at least based on where I started, right? And one of the things that I looked at when I was the most successful in my life, the overall, like the happiest I was still a drunk mess and whatever, but like I was on the right path to get away from everything bad, right? I made the decision of it is what it is, right? Like, c'est la vie, right? And I lived that like hardcore, probably to a fault in some cases, right? But I lived that, and I was the change I wanted to see in that particular thing I was doing. And it worked out really, really well until all the things that I was ignoring because of that, view came back to haunt me. So I got to kind of balance that better. But that's that urge you talked about, like it's an urge, it's a state, it's a phase kind of thing. It's so important to be able to recognize this is a state that I'm in currently and not the reality of who I am on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis. And that's huge for people to figure out. It definitely has been for me. Have you seen that with your clients too?
I just got goosebumps when you said that. It's so incredibly powerful to that rephrasing that, where it's really everything in life is temporary. And recognizing that, where it's like, this is not me in that sense. It's not defining me forever from like, there's nothing I can be different. So, and that, like, yes, it does come up in my coaching very often, where it's very often the experiences define, or people define themselves based on the experiences they've made. And being more in that, where it's like, this is the way it is, like this is what you've experienced so far, but that does not mean that it has to stay this way, first of all. And it doesn't mean that it's that this is you. This is not defining you as a human being, because there's, especially when we live in a society the way we live in nowadays, I feel like it's slightly different, because what we forgot for pretty much all around the world, unfortunately, is the essence of it all is still us humans, beings. The layers we put around, that's because there's a society, there's things that we want and desire, there's things happening. But like, in order for us to be able to live in a community or like in a big city, certain things need to function in a certain way in order for us to be able to experience it. But it's important not to define yourself based on your experiences, especially if you have a traumatic experience in the past, or where something was done to you. That is in most cases, it has nothing to do with you as a being. It's not your fault in that sense. And it does not define, or it does not have to define who you are and who you become. There's this very famous, well, she's an author, speaker, Maya Angelou. And I think she passed away a few years ago, but her experience in life, I mean, if I met her and she told me like my life is awful, it sucks, this is the worst experience I could have imagined, and would be in a completely depressed state, I would understand it based on what she experienced in her life. But
Right.
she used those experiences and changed and transformed so that she can help and be of service to others and inspire millions of people around the world. So it's also that kind of acceptance. And when she also talked about like accepting and forgiving. So she said when someone when there's a fight or whatever, or someone is really mistreating you in a big way, then she's like, yes, I forgive you. Does that mean I let you back into my life? Hell no. Here's the door, leave. So
Right.
forgiving also, it doesn't mean that you have to condone it and be okay with it happening again, or letting that person stay. But more important also, or in that connected to that, is forgiving ourselves, because so many things that we blame ourselves for has nothing to do with us. It's an experience that we had, and very often it's someone else's opinion of how we behaved or what we've done, and we internalize that and make that as part of our personality and not just part of our experience, where we then are able to disconnect from it and say, I forgive myself for having acted that way. I was different. I was thinking different. I had different experience before that. I didn't have the knowledge that I have today.
Right.
And then forgiving ourselves is also kind of letting it go and being like, I can now focus on the next step forward.
Yeah.
It's all about self-love.
Yeah, and everything stems from that, right? Like if I can love myself enough and have my cup overflowing, which is what I this is what I talk about a lot, like with my business partner, my girlfriend, all these things. If my cup could overflow in whatever sense that is, whether it be with gratitude, with praise, with love, with money, whatever it is, right? Then you are now able to have enough to give others without draining yourself. And it's that put the air mask on yourself first in the plane crash kind of thing, right? You can't help anybody if you're blacked out. It's a pretty simple thing for people to grasp in that situation, but it's the same thing in day-to-day life. Everything that we do and experience in our day-to-day lives, in my view anyways, it's a breath of air, right? It's a breath of oxygen. Well, if you're suffocating yourself because you're stuck on who other people have told you are, you're not getting enough air, and you definitely aren't going to be able to give anybody anything else of any value or help. So definitely, that internalizing things can be so damaging. And for the vast majority of my adult life, that's what my issue was I had internalized a lot of really stupid stuff, that other people told me I was and expected of me and whatever, both good and bad. But I also internalized the fact that like, this is my lot in life and this is what I'm supposed to be, like that fact, and that was really, really dumb. And it led me down a really bad place. And hopefully through listening to all this stuff and people that you help directly, others can figure that out, that it is just a state that they're in. I think the only thing people should internalize are gratitude and positive things about themselves. I'm grateful to be awake today. I'm grateful that I was able to get out of bed. I'm grateful that I have the ability to reach out and talk to people like this. So I'm sure you are too. Things like that. Like what are the good things going on that you can be grateful for? And if people just focused on that, so many problems in life would be solved. And all this nastiness in the world would go away probably.
I totally agree with that, because I mean, there's always positive and negative all the time, because I would say because I love being here. I love having those conversations as well. So I'm very grateful for that moment, for this experience. But if we look at it, there can also be a negative at the same time, because there's a million other things I'm not able to do right now.
Yeah.
And depending on also the way I'm kind of programmed and how my subconscious is really in what kind of state it is, I focus on either the positive or the negative. And I think also, of course, if we look at the evolution of humanity, of how important it was back in the day to focus on the negative, like the danger, because if the bush is shaking and there's a noise, nowadays we don't think much of it. But back in the day, of course, you could have thought like, oh, maybe that there's a butterfly, but it's better to be prepared it's a tiger than, thinking it's a butterfly, because it needs one time, and it's a tiger, not a butterfly, and you're done. So being in that more of a fear, and because not just you but the whole community depended on survival. So survival, and that's also one of the issues I come across all the time, is the difference between survival and being truly alive. And there's a huge difference. But I think in our society we'll learn so much about survival, and we're sold on the idea that this is what life is about, compared to being truly alive, because there's a huge difference. And of course, the survival, like having a job, having education, being in a relationship, or whatever you might grow up with, where it's like, this is what life is about. Everything is just additional. So be happy if you have more than that, but you don't need it. Where it's like, I'm not talking about need, I'm talking about desire and want, and that's an emotion. And nobody has the right to tell me what I want and what I don't want, because only I can feel it, because it's my emotion. And whatever you feel and desire, it's your emotion. And me as a coach, I'm here to support people to acknowledge that also, and don't make it small and be like, well, that would be nice, but it's not possible. Or it's like, who says that? Of course, it's experience, life experience. And also in society, I feel like in very early on, we are trained to, the saying like the world doesn't revolve around you. Probably every child has heard that multiple times, but it's actually factual, the fact, factually, what is the word? It's not true.
Right.
Because if you look at the world, maybe yes, but if we look at the universe, it's infinite as far as we know. Something infinite has, like, the center of something that's infinite, the center is everywhere. So I'm the center of the universe as well as you are, because we're both in the center of infinite space around us. So that saying itself alone is not true, but we take it on as the truth, and we're like, oh, it's not about us, it's about others, it's about something else. And being focused on ourselves is very often, most of the time, almost always, seen as something negative. And I'm like you said, it's not negative. It's, of course, it depends on the huge differentiation between self-love, and therefore loving others and sharing that whatever comes out of my cup as well, and being able to share that with other people, compared to narcissistic people who kind of take whatever is left within your cup to fill and overflow their cup, but then they have like a wall around it so it doesn't spill and nobody else gets any of that.
Right.
So, but I feel like in our society, self-love is very often confused with the narcissistic behavior of people. And it's a huge difference, because I've experienced that in friendships as well, when people, especially when they didn't know me that well yet, and we made plans, and I was like, you know what, sorry, I have to cancel last minute, but I don't feel that well. I just need to re-energize. I need to focus on myself. And without explaining it further, people misunderstood of, oh, something else came up, I'm not that important. But then I was like, no, this is not about that. It's about, if I show up the way I am right now, then I would not be able to give you what you deserve, because I would just be there half focused. I just want to be home and relax and chill and re-energize, because it's been so much going on, and I wouldn't do you justice. This is about love and respect, and not about you're not important, but you're so important that I'm not willing to give you this version I am in this moment. So it's about self-love as well as love for others, if you're coming from that standpoint, of course.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you talked about desire versus need a second ago, which really really resonated with me a little bit about a lot of the narratives that we keep seeing in the media and on the internet about one specific thing that I keep seeing come up, because I look at a lot of real estate stuff, is like landlords are evil and this other thing, right? It's like I could understand it, having been a renter, currently being a renter. I understand where that sentiment comes from, because I've had bad landlords, and that person was not a good person, right? But this idea about generalizing based on one experience to the whole group, how many people that are in that particular situation, or any situation, well, I'll just use renters as the example here, would not have a home if they did not have someone to rent from, right? Because of whatever has led them to their life from that point where they can't afford to buy a house or their own thing. We ignore that side of it to fit the narrative of the greater good, quote unquote. And sometimes that greater good can be a trap too, and that's a whole other can of worms I don't want to get into with this, because that's not really the topic we're at. But if that person did not buy that property for you to be able to rent from them to begin with, you'd be homeless, in so many cases, especially in the States where things are really kind of screwy right now, have been for a long time. Yes, it's expensive. Yes, it's unfortunate in the way that things are going, but you've got a roof over your head, and start being grateful for that. And then figure out how to move forward and get your own thing, because in the States specifically, and I do think in most of the world, there are going to be some outliers that are the exact opposite of this, like communist China or whatever. But we all have the ability to take control of the path that we are on. Everyone can in most places, in most cases, right? There are a lot of things that do stop some people, some places from doing that. But for the most part, you decide where you're going to end up 10 years from now by the actions you take today. If you decided that there was something in Germany that was keeping you from your full potential, you'd find a way out of Germany and go do whatever somewhere else, right? Because you have that mindset to make it happen. Same with me. If I decided that the States wasn't where I wanted, where I could make my thing happen, I would find somewhere else to be. But then that's on a geographical sense. People get stuck in that place metaphorically every single day about, this is my place in life. I'm not supposed to be anything more than this. I am this thing, going back to that. And that just destroys so much potential and so much beauty in life. It's very sad if you think about it too much. So I don't want to think about it too much, but hopefully, what we're doing with what you do with your life mission and your coaching and everything, and what I'm attempting to do with this podcast and getting out to people with this, hopefully that changes some people's minds and how they look at the world and what they can do for and with themselves.
Totally. It's that, I mean, it all comes down pretty much how we are trained, or how we train ourselves to look at things, to look at the world, to look at ourselves. And for most parts, because of our senses, we're so focused on the outside of what is happening right now that we kind of lost the not ability, because the ability is still there, but the access to it, let's say, the access to the ability of imagination. Like kids, they do that all the time. They're born with that. And for the first few years, they see a car, they think it's a dragon, or they have a stick and it's a sword, and you can tell them like it's not. They're like, well, I don't care. I still have fun, And I feel like when we're growing up, we're like, oh, but that's not a stick. That's just water. That's just here for the purpose of survival. And I'm like, okay, just so what? You can focus.
Right. I mean, where is the joy in life anymore? It's gone. If you look at everything as utilitarian, you lose all joy in anything.
Yeah. And of course, if we just look at the negative, we can always find negative. We can always find the negative if we look for it. It's very easy to find. And I always challenge people and be like, okay, if you see the negative, say, okay, this is what's happening right now. Now let's look for at least one positive thing.
Yeah, because everything has to have a reaction, right?
Yeah.
And it might be really hard to see or imperceptible sometimes, but like you will find it if you train yourself to look for it. Is that
Yeah.
what you're saying?
Absolutely. And it's very interesting when you do that, and people are like, oh, well, usually I see, I like trees or the nature, but right now I don't feel like I don't like it. I'm like, oh, so it's not about it's not beautiful, but you're not connecting to it because you're connecting to the negative right now. So it's all about that perception, about the what you look like, not just what you look at, but how you look at it. And we're like, oh yeah, that's nice, but, and then we go back very often to the negative, where it's like, yeah, well, it's nice to be able to go for a walk, but still things are getting more expensive, and this is happening and that is happening. One of my coaches said, I think that was 2 years ago, and everything kind of like got more expensive, and most people were like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And he was like, well, when things are more expensive, he doesn't think about it in the way where like, oh, now I cannot afford it, or why did it get more expensive? But he looks at it like, well, nothing I can change about that. But what I can change about what I can change is the way I think about it, what I focus on, and that is how can I generate more income?
Right. Because if things are more expensive, there's an opportunity there somewhere to do that.
Yeah, because money is always there. It might not be in our experience right now, but
Right.
it is somewhere. So why not find a way to make it find you? There's
Yep.
always like, it's always in motion. It's always in motion. It's like it's basically also that law of action reaction. If we hold on to that thought um, of of lack, I mean, if I were money, I would not want to go to a person who thinks negatively about me and just feels like, oh, there's not enough of it. And, why would I want to go to that person?
Right.
And it's that
Yeah, and
empty.
actually, I think that's and anthropomorph, and I'm going to get that word wrong, and anthropification of things, like Disney with their animals, everything's all made to look cute and human, whatever. That's what honestly just drives me nuts for the most part. But there are some things where it does make sense for us to be able to properly utilize things, right? Like money, I think, is actually a really good example of that. You said if you were money, you wouldn't want to be where things are negative. Well, of course not, right? Because what is the purpose? If you're going to assign purpose to the thing, what is the purpose of money? It is a tool to do things, right? If those things are going to be, ultimately negative or in a bad space, money doesn't want to be there. That's ultimately why, if you look at like dictatorships, like the really, really bad ones, right? Like let's go back to Saddam Hussein in Iraq and all that stuff going on there with those golden palace and toilet seats and whatever. Like that, none of that served any purpose. And if you believe in karma, that came back around to him in probably the worst way possible, which whatever, that guy had it coming. How that was all redistributed afterwards, whatever, is a whole political mess. But it did end up in places where it was doing better things than what was happening with him. Well, place. And that's kind of getting off topic a little bit, I guess. But coming at or going into life and looking at things from a perspective of abundance, right? Not scarcity.
Yeah.
It's there. Again, I don't really pay attention too much to what's going on in Europe and Germany specifically, or anything like that. I don't live there, so it doesn't affect my day-to-day so much. But I do know in the States, since the pandemic and all this stuff, we created and printed more money than has ever been printed in the history of the country in like an 18-month span. But people are still sitting out there saying, "Oh, well, I'm broke and I don't have any money." There's an extra $24 trillion or whatever out there, like that were just poofed into air overnight, basically. The reason you don't have more money is because you're not finding it, or you're not letting it find you. You're taking this narrative that everything's terrible and it was all filtered to the top. Well, in that time, there were more millionaires created from nothing, essentially, than any other time in human history. So they have the right idea. What stopped you? And it's crazy to think about when you really look at how people view things. and what that leads to in their lives. And it's so easy to shift that if you just allow yourself to.
That's I like the example you just gave, because it really emphasizes the power people give away so easily, where it's like, well, it's the outside circumstances that dictate how I feel and what I do and what's possible and what's not possible. Now, granted, there are specific situations where that probably is the case. If I've worked with people where it was very much the husband deciding what the wife can and cannot do. But sometimes it's a cultural thing where it's just not possible, kind of, where it feels impossible to get out of that. And but there's always a choice where it's like, okay, do I go with that and I'm okay with it? But then I'm like, then do not complain about it. Do not say, oh, it's out of my hand, because you still have a choice. Now, of course, if you get killed for something, or if you still live in a country where if you speak up, then you will be in prison, whatever, then of course it's also about safety. Like, is your physical health and well-being at stake? Then of course it's important to look for support where you can get out of that environment safely. I'm not saying like if you are in a dangerous environment that you just leave and say, hey, I'm out of here, because sometimes that just doesn't work. But so often we put ourselves in a situation, or within a situation, we still have the same mindset, even though there's nobody around us that is threatening us. There's nobody around us who is putting any limitations on us, but it's ourselves. We put so many limitations on ourselves, but then we say it's the outside. It's because of the economy. It's because of this. It's because of that. Like you just said, in all that like struggle, so many people came out of it and they grew from that. Now, I'm not saying if someone is broke right now that they're at any fault or there's anything negative about them, but it's about changing the mindset and changing the perspective. Like, well, maybe I can change something, because we give the power away as long as we focus on the outside and say the outside has the power over me, how I feel and what I experience. And that's also one of the things that I always make sure that people that I work with, they start working on that belief of it goes inside out. What I experience is a reflection of what's going on within me, and less and less has the outside has less and less of an impact on how they feel and what they do and how they do things. And that's where really the power is. There's a lot of things that are going to happen around us in this world at all times. If you look back at the history of human existence, there's not been even a one day where there was not a war going on. It's always probably going to happen. But if we focus on the negative, that's a choice. If we focus on the positive, it's a choice. If we focus on the opportunity, on looking at what can we change within our limited radius, pretty much, then look at that and say, what can I do in this very moment so that I can create that overflow of my cup? Because also with money, even if when there's like this belief around rich people are bad or whatever, I don't believe in that at all. Money is neutral, and people choose what they do with money. I see money as an enhancer of the personality that people already have. Even if they might seem like they're changing, suddenly they have money, they're changing. I don't believe in that. I believe that it's already within them, but now they have money, they have access to that, and they can show who they truly are. Imagine the good people, if they were like, if every good person was rich, what we could do with that.
Yeah. Well, if you look at, that application of who you are, money as a tool for that, right? And I don't know where you stand on, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, all that kind of stuff that people are accusing them of now and whatever. But if you look back at everything that man did with everything he made from Microsoft up until he left that company, right? Or sold out of it, whatever he did. Like 95% of everything he made went to charity of some kind. And he's still one of the richest people ever in history because that's just, he had this amazing thing that he marketed very well, whatever. 95% of what he made went to some kind of charity to help those less fortunate than him. And somehow this guy's a bad person. Like that just blows my mind, right? Like, and then people still claim, oh, he's still hoarding too much. If you gave away 95% of everything you had over your lifetime, you'd have literally nothing, right? Because it's about scale, and that 5% more than we would ever see in a lifetime in most people's cases. Not saying you can't see it, but if you're going to look at statistically, that's just not going to happen. But somehow he's a bad dude, and that always has blown my mind. Do I agree with a lot of things he said or does? No, but if you got that kind of resource and you're going to give away 95% of it, I don't think that's a bad thing. No, the thing with the guy that just sold out of Patagonia, I think about a year ago, that outdoor company, I think he gave the entirety of it to a charity, $4 billion something. It's like, and somehow he's a bad person for doing it because it's a publicity stunt. Like, the guy's like 100 some years old or whatever he is. He's ancient. He has no need for any of it, and he saw a purpose and gave it to it. Good for him. We should all strive to be so nice.
Problem I see in the whole thing is because I'm not familiar with any of what's happening right now, or because for me I limit myself a lot, what kind of news I accept and what I look for. But what that just shows a lot is kind of the mindset where it's, why is he rich? For the most part, because he created something that people could utilize and use. So yes, a lot of money went his way, but that's because he created something to make life easier for other people. If you don't want anyone to be rich, then look at what they created, don't buy it, go and build it yourself. If you have the ability, if you want that, but don't blame that blame that people always put on other people, because yes, there's rich people out there. That does not mean that other people cannot get rich while they're still rich. They can still get rich while he has still his billions or whatever. There's no law where it says while he's still rich, there's one person, and that's specifically you cannot get rich while he is. Come on.
Right. If you look at reality, what's actually happening every single day, that's different. But people bias themselves and what they look at towards what they want to hear or see, right? Which whole industry has been founded on with mass media news and all this kind of stuff. So, and they're making a lot of money doing it too. So,
I think it's. I had a conversation not too long ago with someone about also religion and how back in the day it was compared to nowadays, where nowadays someone tells me oh, I have to suffer in this life to be rewarded in the next life. I'm like, I'm not sure that's the way it works, because basically you're spitting on a gift that you're receiving and say, well, I don't like this gift, but I think I'm going to like the next one, and please give me the next one because and by the way, it needs to be better than this one. I don't know if that's the way it works. Back in the day, I completely understood that people needed to think in certain ways because they were suffering. They didn't, if you were born into a specific family, you were not able to get out of it because that's not the way society worked back in the day. Like in the Middle Ages, if you were born a farmer, you could not become anything different. It was very difficult. So you were born into a specific place, and that's where it had to stay pretty much. And I think in those situations, that hope of, well, it is really bad right now, but as long as like this, when I suffer in this life, the next one will be beautiful. I understand where this is coming from in that sense, because otherwise people would have just given up. Because what would be the purpose of suffer if there's no hope for anything better after that? But nowadays, I think we're putting it so much on people who are actually doing something good. And that's why also I feel a lot of good people who really want to change this world for the better, they're a little bit afraid of generating money because it's like, well, how is it going to look? Or is it like coming from ego if I want to create abundance. But it's not. It's like, who tells you that you're not allowed to experience whatever we want to experience? And yes, if it's a car, it's a car. If it's something else, it's something else. But that doesn't mean you're taking away from other people. And also, if you're not experiencing that, then I would encourage you not to go into the blame and into, well, maybe hopefully something will change in the future. But look at yourself and say, what can I do? What is my power? What can I do in order to make this life an experience that's worthwhile? How can I make the best out of it? And how can I appreciate that gift and not spit on it?
Yeah, that is beautifully said, and that sums up very well everything that I believe. I'm really glad that, again, I'm not alone in that, and that you're out there doing the good work and helping people see that light as well. That's amazing. Especially, you're still pretty young. I think you're younger than me, so you're doing some really good, impactful things in the world at a young age, which is even better, right? We have basically like a whole blank generation for various reasons, right? And so many people just ended up doing nothing with their lives. It's great to see that there's hope for the future, and then there's people out there like yourself and many, many others too that are seeing the light and seeing the world for what it really is and what it can be. So that's awesome. Thank you for everything you're doing. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for those words.
So getting down towards the end of this year, because we're kind of getting down to the wire on this, one of the things I like to ask my guests is about books. I'm sure you read, right?
Yes.
So what would you say are 3 books that have been super impactful in your life that really made you like change your view on something? And you cannot say any religious books; those are too easy.
Okay. Well, if you don't see it, but there's like a whole stack of books behind me.
Okay.
One that recently, like about a year ago, really changed what I mentioned before with affirmations. It's Mirror Work by Louisa Hay, and it's just basically because the way she's changed my way of thinking about how to utilize affirmations, where it's like not about, oh, I love myself, but hey, I know I'm not there yet, but I'm willing to go on that journey. I'm willing to go on that adventure where it's already showing self-love to say, hi, I'm not there, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to go there. And I haven't finished the book, but it was life-changing for me.
Okay. So I'll have to check that one out. I've not heard of that one. So what's another one?
Then another one is called The Power of Now.
Okay.
Who's that?
Pretty sure I've heard of that one before. I remember who wrote it though.
Eckhart Tolle. And that's for me really a very magical book, because I have not finished it, but I pick it up when I have that feeling of like I need something, like an answer or something, and I pick it up. I just open a page, and so far every time I open it, it was like, oh, okay, something.
Okay, yeah, it's one of those books. There's an answer on every page.
Yeah, and it's like about self-reflection. It's about really coming back to yourself and being really present right now, right here, right now. And
okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then the third one.
And third.
Did I put you on the spot?
No, it's all good. It's all good. Like it's the same with, or the even worse question would be for me, like 3 favorite actors or movies. I would not be able to tell you 3 names.
Well, that's the next question, obviously.
No, I'm not able to, like, probably that's something I can look at into my programming subconsciously, but I go blank when I get asked about names. Another book. It's a German book. Translated, it would be "Life is Too Short for Later."
I like it already.
It's so powerful because she kind of, I forgot the name of the author, but she talked about a self-experiment of like setting her own death date for 1 year from that moment. And she's like, well, if by this time next year I die, what would I decide right now?
That is such a powerful thing. And again, the manifestation thing, I'm going to come back to that for a second here, because I've been called a fatalist for this view, like for thinking about this a little bit, because I guess in a way it kind of is fatalism. But there's a history in my family of males dying early, right? My dad passed away at 52. My grandpa passed away at 49, 50. One of my uncles probably should have passed away around 50, but was able to get on some meds to help things, whatever. There's some hard stuff going on with the family, right? So I actually should take that a little more seriously and go see a doctor about it, but I haven't yet, because that's scary, and that's one of the things I don't really want to face, right? I should though, and I need to. But a lot of what I'm doing in my life and with my business and everything is, what if I don't make it past that point, right? What am I leaving behind for my kids? What legacy do I have, if I have any? And at this moment right now, as of today recording this, I'm 13 and a half years away from that date. That really isn't much time. Life is too short for later. Absolutely. And if you've got that kind of, that pending feeling, that clock, right? Like what it sounds like this author is talking about, you can really, that perspective will change everything you see in the world. It doesn't have to be a negative thing. Like it doesn't have to be that. If I didn't wake up tomorrow morning, would I be happy with what I did today? That's a common question that people should ask themselves. So
yeah. And I think it's also powerful for letting things go, where it's like, okay, if I really have like a year left or whatever time it may be, where it's not a lot, like especially if you're because we don't know, it can happen right now. We don't know. It can happen in 50 years. It's something that we absolutely do not know. But just playing around with that thought, like, what if in a year or 10 years or something like that, it's like, is it worth it to refocus and revisit the past all the time if I have that much left in my future? Do I not rather want to appreciate what I have right now and see how can I appreciate the time that's left? Because otherwise it's like, very often when we look into or too much into the past and think about it so much, where it's not necessary anymore. That's what I'm not talking about where it's necessary and where it's important in order for us to move forward. But if we just go back just for the sake of it, then where it's like, you're very often we think about, we have so much time left. And yeah, I can still think about the past because there's so much time for the future. But what if there's not?
Right. Is there? Yeah. We don't really know.
Yeah.
I think it was a Buddhist thing, or maybe even Buddha's. I think Buddha said it actually was, the greatest mistake you make in life is believing there's tomorrow, or something like that. Or there's always going to be more time. I think what it was. And that's real. We literally don't know. I mean, we could walk out of our wherever we're at right now when we're done with this, and that could be the end of it because something happens. We can't control those things. I don't, when people tell me I'm fatalist for thinking that way, about what I'm doing, I don't buy into that. And you see it all the time with people that are like diagnosed with terminal cancer, and they're like, hey, you have a year to live or 6 months to live, whatever. They're going to get their affairs in order, and they're going to do what they have to do right now from the past, right? But once that's done, they, by and large, they don't care. Like, I'm going to enjoy what I have left. I'm going on that trip I always wanted to go on. Screw the credit card debt, whatever it is. Just enjoy that we have left. And it's an easy trap to fall into, like, well, I don't have terminal cancer, thankfully, so I've got more than 6 months. Yeah, we just don't know that for sure, though. So there's a lot of truth to the idea about living today like it's your last, because it could be. So
I love that saying. I always like to add, I don't know who I got that from, where it's like, live as today was your last day, but dream as if you lived forever.
Yes.
I just love that, where it's really about, there's no cost for envisioning things and for imagining your future and having goals. There's no cost attached to it, but it can create a very, very positive feeling. But of course, it's important also to focus on now and being able to appreciate, no matter what's going on, even if it's negative, to appreciate the contrast of, because life is an up and down. It's like the heartbeat, it's up and down. A flat line is usually called death. And in life, I see it the same way. It's like if it doesn't go up and down, it's mental or spiritual death, where we just don't live, we're not fully alive, and we're not experiencing everything that life has to offer. So get that heart beating and make sure there are ups and downs. And yeah.
That's awesome. You've got such an awesome perspective on all this, and I know it's coming from your time with acting and your coaches and all that kind of stuff, but it just speaks to the power of the mind. A lot. We can change our day to day just by thinking differently about things, right? That's, and we've said manifestation a few times here. That's not to say that I envision a red Ferrari so we can be on the street when I walk outside. Like, no, that's dumb. That's not real, right? And I don't actually care about cars, but that's the example everyone thinks about. And if you really want that thing, and you envision yourself with that thing, everything that you will do to that point, if you're serious about it, will lead you to where you want to be. So that's amazing that you're on that mission, doing helping people see that. So
it's like building. I feel like manifestation is like building a house. First, you have a vision of what you start creating, like, how do you want to live? What is it going to look like? But then that doesn't mean that a second later it's right in front of you. No, first you have to see what's the land, like where's the land I can build it on. Then you have to prepare the foundation, and then brick by brick, basically, at least in the old days, you start building it. You're not starting with the furniture and starting furnishing the place when it's not there yet.
Yeah, so it's not The Sims. You actually got to build the thing. Yeah,
exactly. It starts within your mind first, and then it's the same with manifestation. It's like first you start it within your mind, and then step by step you start creating it and manifesting it into your life.
Yeah, definitely. And if you remember the book and the film The Secret, that whole thing will go around for a long time. That's all they're talking about in that whole thing is believe you can, so you will.
Yeah.
Of course, that gets a bad rap too because it's all woo woo whatever. But I think there's a lot of valuable information in that. So, no, those books, I'll have to check those out for sure. I said I've heard of The Power of Now. I think I have anyways. The other two I'll definitely have to check out. And I'm working on curating a list of books for people that are listening to this whole thing to kind of put together from all my guests. So those will definitely be on that list, and I'm sure people will find value in them somewhere, just like you have.
Awesome.
So the last question I always ask my guests is, what is something that's coming up in your life, whether it's business, life, whatever it is, that you're super excited about? What's the thing that you're really pumped about right now?
Right now, I'm really looking forward to seeing my family again on a personal level. I'm visiting Austria because I see them only a few times a year, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to spending some quality time with them, and also like reflecting this year, the progress I've made and building on that. Next year, there's a few exciting things that I'm going to start within my coaching because it's a holistic approach. So I'm going to start gathering people to start projects with so that we can do workshops together, but also looking forward to implementing yoga or meditations from different instructors within my coaching and co-create. I don't believe in competition. I believe in co-creation, and I'm looking forward to continuing that co-creation next year, or not just next year, but until next year, and then continuing it for the rest of my life. So, awesome. Yeah, that's two things I'm really excited for.
Awesome. That sounds amazing. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of that. Collaborations are always good when they're done correctly. Some have not been, but when they're done correctly. So I'm really looking forward to that, and seeing what you do with all that. So where are some places that our listeners can find you? Your social media, website, whatever it is you want to give out?
Sure. So on Facebook, I have a group. It's called Embrace Your Vulnerability and Live with Purpose. And like the name says, it's all about being really authentic and finding to yourself, sharing content in there, and you can also reach out to me through that group. And my website, risingtofreedom.com. You can check out my coaching, like what I do, who I am, a little bit more background on me as well. And in there, you can also click a link to talk to me. We can have a chat and see where you are right now and how I might be able to support you on your journey. So yeah, anyone who resonates with what we've talked about today, definitely feel free to reach out to me. And yeah, I'm looking forward to having more people to benefit from my experience, but also from the tools I can share, and together change the world.
Awesome. That sounds amazing. We'll get those links down in the description of the episode and all that, and so people can find out, a little bit more about you in that capacity. So that'll be really good. Is there anything else you want to add in before we get off the air here?
A big thank you. Thank you to you for hosting this. It's been a pleasure talking with you. So thank you so much for inviting me and giving me this opportunity. And of course, thank you to everybody who's listening. I hope that we did you justice, and yeah, the time that you spent here, that we gave you some value, and thank you for that.
I want to thank you as well for coming on. It's been almost an hour and a half. I know 90 minutes out of the day can be kind of a taxing thing, but I do think that people will find value out of this, and it's going to be well worth it to help more people in the world. It's already had some impact just on my side of things from what I've been doing with guests so far, and I know getting more people like you on is going to help that a lot too. So I want to thank you for your time and coming on and talking to us as well. Again, to my listeners, of course, thank you for listening and supporting the channel and the podcast and all that. We're growing, and by the time this comes out, I think we're going to see some pretty significant growth from the day we're recording this too. So I'm really excited for the future, especially talking with people like you. This is going to be a really wild ride, I think, this coming year. I'm not sure I'm quite ready for it yet, but I'm holding on, working on it. We're going to get there. This has been an awesome conversation. Thank you so much, Martin, for coming on. And again, thank you for your time. I think we're just going to call it good for the podcast at this point then, and we'll get off the air here. So everyone, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you out there. You guys keep out there and keep crushing it.
Thank you, Tony.